Welcome back to Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. This one is simply entitled VAX. Now, what the hell does VAX mean? Well, I don't know. I didn't look it up beforehand. What I can tell you is this was back when I was in high school. Now, I was a volunteer in the school library. That is a story I will tell one day of some of the stuff that I did. Being that I was kind of in with the librarian, I almost had keys to the place, if you will. I was one of the first to get access to this VAX system. So we're going back now to 9th grade or 10th grade? Let us see. We're going to say a good 94, 95. Somewhere in 1994, 1995. Now, if this was indeed 1994, the best you were probably going to be running on your PC or compatible would be Windows 3.1. So anybody who harks back from the Windows 3.1 days, you know, I know there's a lot of millennials out there. Oh, we had XP when I grew up. Yeah, good for you, okay? I typed shit at a DOS prompt, and it was all keyboard. We didn't have this thing called a mouse. I mean, they were round, but, you know, we didn't have them. I dropped my little paper here. I don't want to lose that. This internet access was not true internet access in that it was all text-based. Could you use this under Windows 95? Absolutely. And you could use the Windows Terminal program or Hyper Terminal, depending on exactly what variant thereof you were running, to access this. It was a dial-up access for grades kindergarten through 12th grade. And the way it worked was it would start, every email address was K12 for K12, kindergarten through 12. Then you would have a 2-letter town. Mine was WH for West Hempstead. And then KRJ, which were my initials, backwards. And that gave you the random enough username that's how they did it. Could there be people with the same names? Yes. How did that work? Don't remember. It's inconsequential. This particular access was granted through a nearby college called Hofstra, Hofstra University. They would give us a local number to dial, which I remember was 565-9002. I often was busy in the later years when more and more people went on, but they did have a bank of modems indeed. So you'd keep dialing and dialing and dialing and dialing and dialing. Does anybody remember AOL when they went to unlimited access and every number was always busy until you finally got on? And then we had those pop-up blockers that would not block ads and ad pop-ups but prevent you from being logged off AOL. Anybody remember this? No? Yeah, you do? You do? Okay. That's good. At least two people on the same page. So anyway, this was text only. There was no you've got mail or any of that crap. You just dialed up and it would ask username, you'd type it in, password, you'd type it in, and it would give you, welcome to blah blah blah. And I would dial up on an IBM PC computer. That was a computer that originally debuted in 1984. That's a hell of a machine. That is a hell of a machine. Very, very hefty. I had the upgraded one, which was a little bit later release, 286 Intel processor. It had 1.6 megabytes of RAM, or 1,664 kilobytes. That was in EMS memory, or extended memory. I forget exactly the terms. Anyway, it's extended memory, so I could load DOS drivers high. No, you don't remember that? Load DOS drivers high. I ran Windows 3.1, and I had a modem in there. Now, you all remember your 56K modem and downloading, 3 megabyte files. This was not a possibility when I was dialing up at 2,400 bits per second. 2,400 bits per second, you can roughly divide that by 8. So that was 300 bytes per second. So 300 bytes, you would need 3 of those, 3 1/3 of those to reach 1 kilobyte. That's 1,000 bytes. That's how slow this was. It was perfectly adequate for text on the screen. It really was. 1,200 BPS was adequate for text on the screen. 300 was, you could watch as if somebody was typing at very high speed. But 2,400 was okay. You could definitely get by with that for text-based stuff, which this all was. Now, what could you do with it? Well, you did have email, and you would just type in mail. And it would say, okay, opening mail, whatever. You have 3 new messages. What would you like to do? And then you would type in read, or list, or delete, or forward, or reply, and you just type all this stuff in with that, and it would just display on the screen. If there were multiple pages, you could it would wait, and you could read through that later. But typically in these days, your emails were not paragraphs long. They were just like, wow, email is so cool, email me back. And then you get an email back, yeah, it's amazing we can communicate this way. Yes, amazing, it really beats out the telephone, although oddly we're using the telephone lines to do this. Anyway, let's see what else about that. I used to go on to, now you had Usenet. That was called news groups, and I would read rec.humor.funny, run by or moderated by Brad Templeton. Yes, Brad Templeton is still around, and you can look him up on Wikipedia. So he used to moderate that, and I'd read some of the news groups I was in on. Email lists I was in on, that they would send messages out every couple days. You didn't get spam. There was no spam emails. It just didn't happen. There was none of this crap because nobody was selling your address to all of these companies like goes on today. Remember, it only takes one party to have your email address for it to be sold to millions, and then all of a sudden you're just a spam box, and that's it. So there was the Usenet, there was Archie and Veronica searches. I shit you not, this was early internet. So there was that. But one of the main things that you were going to be using was your web browser. Now, due to the way this connection was designed, this was sort of a, I want to almost say a SLIP connection, serial line internet protocol, but it's not. It was more of a PPP, point-to-point protocol, something along those lines. It was text only. So that's all you got. If you tried on your Windows PC to launch a dial-up connection and then open Internet Explorer, and that was something you could do if you had an AOL account and, let's say, Windows 95, you could hit the little E and it would work. Now, you're still on dial-up, but again, websites were so much simpler back then. This didn't allow that. You could have binary transfer, but it was done over an X modem, Y modem, or Z modem protocol within your terminal program. In a nutshell, that means that you had the equivalent of what was called a teletype back in the day that newspapers had, where things were sent over a wire and printed out on paper, and that was the sound that you'd used to hear in the background of 1010 Wins News. I guess you have to be an old fart like me to remember this stuff. But anyway, they had that stuff. That is essentially what this was, except this was a glass terminal, or a glass teletype, I should say, meaning your CRT screen, because fuck LCDs, your CRT screen, because that's all we had, was glass. So they called it a glass teletype. And you could not only receive information on the wire, but send information on the wire. And that's how it worked. So that's all you had. Now, if you wanted a binary file, which would be anything other than text, in other words, you want to launch a program on your computer and you double-click its icon, or however you launch it, or whatever it is, that would be an executable file, which would be a binary file instead of just straight text, which cannot be executed. It needs machine code, machine language for it to work. So you would have to initiate the transfer. You'd have like a download command, and I'll get into what that was in a minute. I don't remember the actual command, but you would issue that command, you know, like it was kind of like DLZ modem and then the file name, and it would say waiting, and then you would hit a special key combination if you were running a DOS terminal program, or if you're running hyperterminal, you would open that up and receive X modem, Y modem, Z modem, and then say start, and your terminal program would then send whatever characters to the system and say, I'm ready for a binary transfer, start sending me that information, and when you're done, finish it up with these characters. So I'll know that you're done. And I'll zip those last characters off and save that as a binary file on the user's computer. And you sat there, and it would give you, I don't remember if it actually gave you a byte count as a download. I don't think it did. I think you just pretty much sat there and waited. And like I said, 300 bytes per second. So if you had a 5 kilobyte file, you were looking at 15 seconds for 5 kilobytes. Now, if you want that in megabytes, times that by 1,000. Yeah, that's a long wait at 2400 BPS. Now, you could dial up with a faster modem. In fact, at school we had a 14.4 modem. Ooh, a Boca modem. Try Wikipediaing that. You might even find something, I think. So you could get binary files, and a lot of my early DOS games from that era I had downloaded over that. And the way it would work was your account had I think it was actually a 1 megabyte limit. That was all the storage space that you had. And that 1 megabyte limit would mean that you could only download files that were that or less in size. Although, I actually found a way around that. The way around that was, the way it worked was, you would go to the World Wide Web, or the Internet as we now know it, and instead of Internet Explorer or Netscape Navigator, Netscape Communicator, if you even remember that, Microsoft Edge, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, or any of those web browsers that you might use, Safari, I don't know, Apple people. Any web browser you might be familiar with, there's this one called Lynx, Lynx, and at the prompt you would type in Lynx and it would go to the World Wide Web, and you'd hit O for open, and it would ask you what site you wanted. So if you wanted to go and do a Google search, you type in www.google.com. Now, you had to type the www and the dot and the Google and the dot and the com, and you had to get it right, because there was none of this automatic searching like we have today, and kind of guessing and autocomplete and all that stuff didn't exist. So you had to spell it right and get it right, and then you did, and then you got to Google, and then you could type in what you want. And to navigate this, because you didn't have a mouse, even if you had a mouse, you couldn't use a mouse because it wasn't that type of system, you would use the tab key, and it would tab to every clickable link on this page. Now remember that this was a text-only screen, so typically the amount of text that you would have on the screen at absolute maximum was 80 columns by 25 rows. So whatever 80 times 25 is how many characters you had on the screen at a time. So there were only a certain amount of links that you could possibly have to tab through. Yes, there could have been really small links and a whole bunch of them, and you'd be hitting that tab key a lot. But it was navigable or navigatable. It was able to be done. You could do it, is what I'm telling you. So I could go to download.com. That was a site that wasn't spam back in the day, and you could type in games, DOS games or something, and find them. And when you would download it, it would download it to your account. But the problem was, if you tried to download a file that was too big for your account space, then it would error out, close out of links, and drop you back to the command prompt saying, you know, quota exceeded. But I found that if you did a directory listing of your account, you could see that temporary file that completed, even though you didn't have the storage space in your account, because your storage space could only be twice that, it could only be half that of your account space. So if you downloaded a 1 megabyte file, you couldn't get a 1 megabyte file. You could only get a 500 kilobyte file, which is half of that, because when you would go to save it, when it would go to save it, it would copy the temporary file to the actual file name you wanted in your account, and then delete the temporary file. But if you didn't have enough room, it would try to copy that, but couldn't complete it, and error out and put you back there. But if you did a listing, you could find this temporary file, download that, rename the file, and there's your file. So I just doubled my download capabilities by figuring out that trick. It worked every time. Still took fucking forever to download, but yeah. Can you whistle 2400 baud? BPS baud? It was kind of, we used the same. 1200? 300? No? I could. Not really. I could make characters show up on the screen by whistling if I picked the phone up while it was, remember picking the phone up while somebody was online with a dial-up connection? When it's text, you could whistle into the phone and make shit appear on the screen. It was illegible garbage, but you could make it happen. And I used to could do that. Anyways, that was downloading stuff and links. That was a lot of fun. And one other thing is, I had access to this at my school library. I was able to go in the back where students weren't allowed, because that was like the office, and they had the good computer there. I was given access to the good computer, and I'd go in there every day on my lunch break, because I didn't want to sit with the potheads in my grade and deal with their bullshit and listen to that. I said, let me learn something. Let me do something with my life instead. And I was a nerd. I make no bones about that. Nerds today, everybody likes nerds today because they fucking know their shit. Anyways, so that's what I did. And I sat there, and I would go on. I would read whatever email I had. And I would also go, typically on Mondays, and go to weather.com or AccuWeather.com or something, and in this terminal program, and there's a key on the keyboard on IBM and compatibles. It says print screen or PRTSC or PS or something along those lines. And you probably know about that, and that will give you like a screenshot. Well, we did this, but it was all like hammer and chisel and stone kind of shit back in the Stone Age, like I was. So when you did that from a DOS program, it would take a dump of that screen, which was straight text, and send it out to the default output port to your printer, which typically was the first parallel port, or LPT1, line printer, port 1, which is harking back to the old days. And in doing that, your dot matrix printer at the time would go zip, 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 and, you know, it would print out the weather that was on the screen, and there were no graphics. It was text only, you know, Monday, high of 86, low of 72, chance of rain, 10%. Humidity, 68%. I don't know. Something like that. And that's what you'd get. And the internet was a happy place. There also was one other feature of that called phone. Phone. And phone was something along the lines of AOL Instant Messenger, or kind of what you do now with texting, except you could see everything live. In other words, today you go to send a text with your phone, so you got your phone and you say, "Hi, how are you?" and then hit send. Well, this didn't work that way. When they typed, it'd show up on your screen. So if they made, you know, I don't know if you've ever done this, like, you're a fucking idiot, and then you backspace it out, they'd see that and see you backspace it out. So you had to watch what you were doing. But you could do that, and then you would kind of have to take turns. You know, "Hi, how are you?" Then I'd respond, "I'm fine. How are you? What are you doing? What's up? What's going on?" "Oh, I'm okay. Just got back from the store." "Oh, cool. What'd you get?" "Oh, I got eggs, milk, and bread." "Oh, wow, that sounds nice." You just make up whatever conversation you want. And you could do this with any other users that were on, and you could have it list and say which users were logged in. So you could message them. Now, they didn't have to answer your call, but they could. There was also a way for you to do a three-way call, phone call, and even a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, even 9-way, essentially a conference call, except we're all typing, and it all went at the same time. And yes, when you had that many people and a slow modem connection, it was kind of fucking all over the place where characters were appearing. So that was a lot of fun. And eventually they shut that off, and I no longer had access to that. But at that point, I had already gotten an AOL account, which was dial-up still, which was in 1997, 8, something like that. And then I had that, and I used that instead. And if you wanted to download a file, you could just download it like you're accustomed to today. And the internet was a much more wonderful thing. But I do have the experience of having to type all of this manually and do all of this manually. And that is something that people today will never, ever experience. They might also say that they don't want to experience that, but you actually did. Because like I said, the internet was a much safer place. You weren't doing online, buying stuff online. There was no credit card hacks and stealing your personal information. Yeah, it happened, yes, but the possibility was so much lower than it is today. That's how it was a much safer place, a much easier place, and you really could get the information you wanted faster because there was no extraneous bullshit involved. And that's pretty much what we have now with the internet. Ads on everything, everywhere. That didn't used to exist. And in the text-based world, it did not exist, period. Because it simply couldn't. That's going to wrap up this episode of Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. I thank you very kindly for watching, and I greatly appreciate it. My battery's going low, sorry. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe, and take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.